Hello, brothers and sisters in Calvary International Church. I think as most of you know already, today is a day of mourning. Yesterday at about 2:30 in the afternoon, God called Kaleb Hostetler to be home with him perfectly for all eternity. I know that for those of us who stay behind, this is a day that's filled with grief. And it's not just today, it's the coming days and the coming weeks and months and years. And Kaleb's family in particular will always have a Caleb-shaped hole in their hearts. The hope that we have, though, is for those who love Jesus and belong to him. That hole will be filled perfectly again someday. I have permission from the family to share briefly about Kaleb's last minutes on earth. So over the weekend, it was pretty clear that Kaleb's health was declining steadily. And for that reason, the family was able to gather in Kaleb's hospital room yesterday in the early afternoon. And they were able to spend time together, an opportunity for each of Kaleb's siblings to express how much they loved him and how much they appreciated him, an opportunity for them to say goodbye. And then also to affirm to Kaleb that he was free to go if Jesus was calling him. A little later in the day, after the doctor said it was clear that the end was near, they were able to take him off a lot of his tubes and machines and have an opportunity for Fernie and Belton to hold their son in the last minutes of his life on earth. And I understand that as the two of them carrying Kaleb to Jesus, because Jesus took Kaleb from their arms to be with him. Today, there will be a brief velorio, a viewing for Kaleb, and then the burial. But this is a closed event. Unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 guidelines, the family is very restricted in who will be able to be present today for that. They'll have to keep it very small, and it will be very short. So for this reason, we're not able to invite everyone to come. However, it is extremely important to Dalton and Fernie and the family that at some point in the future, we be able to celebrate Kaleb's life together in physical proximity and worship the Lord together and grieve together. So tentatively, the family is looking at early October. October 6th is Kaleb's birthday. They're looking at that time when we can actually hopefully have a gathering of people that would be open to all who loved Kaleb. Because we know that there are so many in our community who not only loved Kaleb, but fought for him in prayer and fought for the Hostetler family. And the family and the church is likewise deeply grateful to all of you. To close this video, I just want to share a story and a prayer. The first is a story about Kaleb that I actually told his family yesterday, and it marked me deeply, and I've never forgotten it. Kaleb was about 2 years old, and we were holding an afternoon prayer service at Calvary at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We used to do this weekly. And the Hostetler family was coming to that meeting, but they arrived a little bit late. So we were seated in a circle in the fireside room at church singing a hymn. And Kaleb ran in the door before his parents and older siblings did. And he got to the doorway and he looked around, and I was sitting facing the door, and he looked at me and he came right up to me. He actually ran across to me and he just pulled himself up into my lap and sat on my knees. And he had the biggest smile on his face, and he sat there and he looked all around the circle, just smiling. And actually the focus of the circle came to be on Kaleb. And it was such an unself-conscious display of joy and love. And I remember even as an adult, as a friend of the family, as a pastor, I felt God's love through Kaleb in that moment. It's hard to describe how I saw the light of God shining through him. This is just a 2-year-old. And for those who have accompanied Kaleb's fight with sickness and cancer and leukemia, you have seen the light of Christ shine through him and his family over and over and over again with increasing brightness. And I'm grateful to God for that day when I saw God's light shining through Kaleb, even as a little child. The last thing I want to do is share a prayer with you. It's from a book of prayers called Every Moment Holy. And this is a prayer that's called, it's a liturgy for missing someone. And of course, Kaleb's family is missing him the most poignantly. But there are many around the world who are also missing Kaleb deeply. And this is the prayer. We willingly carry this ache. We carry it, O Father, to you. You created our hearts for unbroken fellowship, yet the constraints of time and place and the stuttering rhythms of life in a fallen world dictate that all fellowship in these days will at times be broken or incomplete. And so we find ourselves in this season bearing the sorrow of our separation from Kaleb. We acknowledge, O Lord, that it is a right and a good thing to miss deeply those whom we love, but with whom we cannot be physically present. Grant us, therefore, courage to love well, even in this time of absence. Grant us courage to shrink neither from the aches nor from the joys that love brings. For each, willingly received, will accomplish the good works you have appointed them to do. Therefore, we praise you even for our sadness, knowing that the sorrows we steward in this life will in time be redeemed. We praise you also knowing that these glad aches are a true measure of the bonds you have wrought between our hearts. Now use our sorrows as tools in your hand, O Lord, shaping our hearts into a truer imitation of the affections of Christ. Use even this sadness to carve out spaces in our souls where still greater repositories of holy affection might be held, unto the end that we might better love in times of absence and in times of presence alike. We now entrust all to your keeping for the life to come. How we look forward, O Lord, to that joyous reunion, to the day when all our fellowships will be restored, eternal and unbroken. Amen. I would invite you to continue to pray for the Hostetler family as God brings them to mind, not only today, but in the coming weeks and months and years. Uphold them in their grief and pray that the Lord would give them a vision of hope for their future and for how he wants to use this grief for his glory. Thank you, brothers and sisters.